I drove down from Carmel, Indiana, and took all the back roads because I'm a rural guy, and I just loved going through the small towns. I stopped at a couple of antique places and got some things I didn't need, and it was just wonderful to be back because actually, I was raised in Ranger, Texas, which has about 6,000 people, very rural. You knew someone was from Ranger, they'd be lying through their tooth, is what people would say, because it was very rural. You see on the supermarket, possum, the other white meat. And that's what we were. And I remember we were not wealthy people, knocking over a Flintstone jelly jar glass. And Mom saying, well, I guess we can't have nice things. And we didn't, I'll guarantee you. We had the only set of matching salad bowls had Cool Whip written on the side. And so that's just how I grew up. And they were staunch Southern Baptists. I mean, they were strict. And so when Coke started coming in cans, well, we couldn't drink Coke out of a can because my parents were afraid that someone would see us drinking a Coke out of a can and think that the Arterburn boys were drinking beer. Well, we were drinking beer anyway, so it didn't really matter, but made them feel better. And, you know, when you grow up in Texas, the thing you want to do is, you want to kill stuff. So I finally convinced my dad to get me a BB gun. And my mom says, well, you know, you're not going to be truly happy till you put someone's eye out with that BB gun. Well, I never put anyone's eye out, but I was never really happy either. And I kind of blamed her for that. I wish she hadn't said that. My dad he's one of the greatest men ever. When he died, I've outlived him this year. The church was packed, the choir was packed, and he was known as Mr. First Baptist Church in Bryan, Texas, where we had moved. And when he told a joke, he would be crying and his face would be red before he got to the punchline. And I think he invented the dad joke. Like, he would say things like, well, I guess you heard about that 12-inch king. No, Dad, what? Yeah, he wasn't a very good king. He's a good ruler. Or, did you hear about that female flamingo married that other flamingo, and he was just a mess. He was a rotten guy, so she had to put her foot down. That's my dad. So anyway, I wish you'd met him. But today, I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff. Did you remember in the songs that you were singing, hearing or singing the lyric, wonder-working God? Well, it was up there. And the first word that I have in my notes to talk to you about is the word wonder. I think that's pretty cool. And you've already sung about it. And wonder is that feeling of surprise and pleasure when you discover something or experience something that's beautiful, unusual, and unexpected. And that is what God does. God is the God of wonder, isn't he? And so a lot of people are doing pretty well, but you've lost the wonder in your life. Your marriage is a good enough marriage, but maybe today I would love to inspire you to fill it with wonder. Or you're single and I'd inspire you to fill that single life with wonder. By the way, if you are single and you get on a dating website, be sure before you meet this person, you ask that person to hold up today's newspaper next to their face and send that picture to you, because you want to be sure it really looks like the thing that they got up there. Probably does. Anyway, just a little tip there. Also, I'll say this: if you're married, stay married. Don't divorce and mess up somebody else's life. But you know, if you marry and divorce and you go on Match.com, they're going to match you with the person you just divorced because you got so much in common. So just don't do it. Just stay together. Anyway, I have attention deficit disorder. I don't know if you noticed that. It's one of the terminal cases. And I just say stupid stuff all the time. I would love to inspire you somehow to have a vision of wonderment in your life. Not motivate you, because you know the least indicator of success in any area is motivation. Because motivation comes and goes. But inspiration and commitment to a plan that I'm inspired to follow, that is something that can change a person's life. And speaking of life, I thought it would be great to start with a little bit of perspective of what we're talking about here. This is the world's largest selfie, right there. There it is. That is a picture from Hubble telescope of the universe, and that's not all of it. But the observable universe is 93 billion light years in diameter, just what we can see. We don't know how far it goes. Okay, but just what we can see. So a light year travels at 5.88 trillion miles in a year. Light goes that fast in a year, or that far. So you take your 93 billion, multiply it by about 6 trillion, and that's the universe, right? Wouldn't you say that is size XXL? It's that big, it's huge. We, in case you're wondering, here we are. See that? That's the Milky Way. There are trillions of galaxies. We're just one. We're not even the biggest galaxy, but there we are. See? There it is. There, it's close up. In the Milky Way, they say now, they've updated their numbers, there are about 400 billion stars, about 200 billion planets, just in our galaxy right there, okay? Milky Way. So, the Hubble, it's been around a long time taking pictures, and there's a new Webb telescope, sees even further back in time, all over this universe. And then they spent billions of dollars on that. And then we've also got the Voyager 1 and 2, out there, and it's looking for intelligent life. And they figured out that if they found intelligent life, and the intelligent life saw this, they'd know exactly who we are and what we're doing. Well, good luck with that. What is that, a little camera down there? I don't know, a little radio? I don't know what it is, but I'm just saying, there's another gold disc on the Voyager, and it's got a etched out image of a man and a woman with no clothes on. And I'm thinking that's the dumbest thing ever. They see that, they're gonna, don't go there. Wow, that is just too weird. There's pornography all over that place. Anyway, so they've sent that out because they want to find life. And scientists get really excited when some planet or something has a couple of elements that in a billion years or so could actually become life. Well, that's the only place you find life. Now think about that. We are a universal anomaly. We only happen here. Not a blip, not a beaming light. Wouldn't you think if there was light, they'd be sending out a beam like we are? No, not there. God has decided that there is only one place there is life. And look at what he gave us to live in. Beautiful planet to live on. You don't find that on any planet. Life, it's dead out there is what I'm saying. But every person here has been given the rarest gift in the universe, life. Now, don't you think it'd be good if you did the best you could with this rare gift that's been given to you by God? It doesn't happen very much ever, anywhere but here. We celebrate when somebody's born. We ought to be celebrating every conception. Woo, another one, it happened. That does not happen anywhere but here. And it happens because God has given us the gift of life. Now, maybe it's not going so well for you, and you need a little bit of help. There are some indicators that you might need help. For instance, let's say the grandkids love the grandparents because they both have a common enemy. That would be an indication that parents ought to be getting a little help there. Or the only exercise you get is mood swings. That's all you're doing. Or you're asking people to be patient while you overreact. Or maybe life is just one awkward moment after another awkward moment with snacks in between. That's not good. Or maybe it feels like your spirit animal has rabies. That is a sign. And or you think it's so rude when people try to talk to you while you're texting. That is not a good sign. There are a lot of other signs, like people say, why don't you get some help? That's a really good sign that maybe you ought to think about it. I always say if one person calls you a horse, ignore that. That's silly. If 2 people call you a horse, well, you might want to think about it. If 3 people call you a horse, you ought to go buy a saddle. I'm just saying. 3 people lined up could be giving you some truth. Now, people don't get help because they're arrogant, or they are stubborn, or they're blind to it, or they don't really see the benefit of it. They don't really believe God wants something great in their life. And I want to tell you, when we create in our lives what I call brilliant humility. Now, here's why it's brilliant. When you're humble, people see it. It shows. Plus, it's the most brilliant strategy that you could ever pick in your life. Because brilliant humility prevents humiliation. If you're humble, you'll never be humiliated. But it often comes after, broken arrogance. We think we know so much, and then we discover we don't. But we don't have to wait to learn it the hard way. You know, I say all the time that we need to learn from others' mistakes. And sadly, I've always chosen to be the others. And I hope people can learn from it. Jeremiah 6:16 says this: stop at the crossroads and look around. Search for the old godly path. Walk in its steps, and you will find peace for your soul. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And if we, at a minimum, don't have peace, maybe there's some things we could do differently to bring wonder back into our lives. I'd love to tell you my favorite show is some hunting or fishing show, but it actually, for a long time, was What Not to Wear. I love that show. Obviously, some of you have never seen the show, but anyway, they would show a video of somebody, their friends would send it, and how horrible these people were dressing. They wanted to help them, and one day there's this woman, she just thought she was amazing. But she was, the worst part of her was right here, and that was the part that was always showing. I just couldn't figure that out. But finally, she surrendered and said, okay, I need help. And Clinton, some people quote John F. Kennedy or something. I quote Clinton of What Not to Wear. And he said this, sometimes you don't know you need help till you get help. And that's so true. Sometimes you don't know how much you need help until you get help. But I'll tell you this, if you have come to Christ, or if you have had a spiritual awakening and you have not been awakened to love other people, then it's missing something. God isn't just loving, He is love. God is love. And if we're acting like we're doing all the right stuff, but we go home and we can't even get out of the parking lot before we're criticizing, angry, bitter, whatever it is, then we need some help. And like those steps we're supposed to follow, I think 12 steps are really great. Some people say, I don't need the 12 steps. I say, well, you need something because we're talking here. If you don't like 12, go to Panera, pick two steps, whatever you need. 3, 8 steps, do that. But have something to grow into, a plan, and that's what I love about the 12 steps. Now, since I created this Life Recovery Bible with Dr. Dave Stoop, we started working on it 35 years ago, and now it's 30 years, almost 4 million. Prison Fellowship, that's the Bible they give away. It's the Pew Bible at Salvation Army. Why is that? Well, all of the study notes there are done by Bible scholars from Christian universities and seminaries, Bible scholars that are all in recovery. And so when a maximum security prison guy in a fluorescent orange suit, when we're doing a Bible study, this guy knows so much, and he says, I'm telling you, these notes, whoever wrote that, they're speaking my language. Yeah, well, they've been where you are. And some of them have been to prison too. So that's why I think it's had such an impact. And a lot of people say, I don't want to go to some kind of recovery group or life recovery group, or I think all that stuff's like a cult. Well, you know, cults, if you know anything about cults, they usually have a leader that claims that they have a power that nobody else has. That's one of the things you see. They also want you to give them a lot of money. Like $1,000 is what I hear on Christian television is probably the most common thing they want to give you. And they say if you give $1,000, then you'll get more back. And I say, well, that's kind of like betting. You should go to Vegas and do your $1,000 there rather than give it, because God never promises more money back. But a cult wants to control you, not free you. And everything I've ever seen in any recovery group, people want you to be free of whatever it is you're struggling with. Some people will say, well, I think these groups might replace the church. No, they build the church. I've never known anybody that got involved in life recovery and said, well, I don't think I need to go to church anymore. No, they are working the steps, and the 12th step inspires them to go bring others in. And they want to do that, and they want to bring them to the church, and they want to bring them to groups. About 40 years ago, Bruce Larson, Keith Miller wrote this book, The Edge of Adventure. And in that, 40 years ago, they said the neighborhood bar is more like what the church ought to be than the church. And at that time, in many cases, it was true. Because at the bar, you walk in, they know who you are, they know your name, they hug you, they say hello, everybody greets you. No shame. You're known and accepted. Well, you walk into some churches and everybody looking you up and down, see if you're dressed right, all this kind of stuff. But I think it's different today. I don't think that is true today the way it was 40 years ago. And I think recovery groups are more what Jesus wanted the church to be than anything I've ever seen. Jesus, I don't know if you noticed this, had a group. He had a group. He modeled group. You can just imagine them sitting around in their group. James, what are you struggling with today? Well, I don't know, jealousy. Jesus, no, I'm good. So they would do stuff in a group. And we need to be in a group. I'm in a group. Tomorrow night, I'll be at my Bible study group that also sits around and we tell each other the truth about ourselves. And I'll be in counseling on Thursday. Some people think I should go twice a week. I'm saying I'm going once, okay? So, and then I'm in an ADHD support group on Thursday night. My wife and I. She's trying to learn how to live with me after all these years. And it's going pretty well so far. We didn't notice some things about each other before we got married, Like I didn't know she had this birth defect. Serious birth defect. No clock in her head. Just no clock. No sense of time whatsoever. The other day she said, honey, what time is it? And I said, well, what time do you think it is? 9:30. No, it's 11:30. Just 2 hours there, just gone. You just missed it. So typical. And then she didn't know I had a birth defect in my head. I have no compass in my head. I do not know directions. I mean, you start talking northeast and stuff like that, you might as well give me latitude and longitude. I don't know anything other than right, left, and recalculating route. We're late everywhere we go because I get lost. So I'm expecting her to hurry up and get ready. And she's in there thinking, doesn't matter, we're going to get lost anyway. But we had to learn to accept each other, which is an amazing recovery principle on page 417 of the big book, where Bill W. said acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. I've tried to argue with that, but it's just true. Accepting responsibility to do whatever I need to do, accepting other people rather than judge them. I'll tell you, if I was a superhero, I would be known as Bullet Point Man. I hated details. I want the headline, the bottom line, what's on the line. If I was a superhero, I'd have a cape with a little dot on the back. I just want the bullet point. My wife didn't know this when we were dating, didn't come up. Is a little bit different in her communication style. She starts with a prelude here, And we start to have a crescendo, a growing intensity up to the climax of the point that she is dramatically going to make with me. And then we have the diminuendo coming down here to the postlude of the presentation. And I better be there. I said to my counselor, oh my goodness, I'm losing right about here. He said, well, you've got to stay with her. He said, you got to find a, he said, you know, people have different sized pores on their face. Why don't you look at that and just look at that, something that keeps you focused. So first time we did it, you know, climax. She goes, honey, you are so with me. I said, you have no idea. If she were here, I wouldn't be telling this story. But we had to accept each other rather than try to change, cure, use criticism. Oh my goodness, acceptance. And that's what recovery is all about. It's working on me, my side of the street, not yours. And that's how we can become something we never dreamed that we could become. People ask me about recovery and the principles of 12 steps. They say, what's this higher power thing? I said, oh, that's such a great concept. Because you see, there are a lot of born-again Christians who've accepted Jesus as their Savior, and they're going to go to heaven. But on earth, Jesus is not their higher power. It'd be really good if they would surrender their lives here on earth. Their ego, their whatever is their higher power, the way it's always been done, the way I was born, whatever it is. But brilliant humility brings us to a place where we're saying, you know what? There's something that needs to have more power in my life than this brain or this heart, where I'm being led by my thoughts or led by my feelings versus the truth of God's word. Romans 12:2 says, don't copy the behaviors of the world, but let God transform you by changing the way that you think. When you surrender to God, he will transform you. And you'll be thinking and saying stuff you never dreamed you could think or say, but you'll never, ever do it by trying harder. Because trying harder just makes trying harder. And it makes it harder on everybody around you. It's just, can't say it enough. But acceptance, now that's something. Then there's this thing, people say, well, what about that God as we understood him? What's that all about? I said, well, I think that's a great concept too. Because when I was growing up, I had this weird thought, the God that I understood, if you did something wrong, he'd cut your arm off or something like that. You know, that's the way he was. You're bad, you're gonna, you never know what's gonna happen. And if you don't tithe, you better be careful driving home from church. It's not gonna go well. That's how I understood God. I understand God much differently today. And a lot of people that are in the midst of addiction or depression or the aftermath of divorce or whatever, they feel so alienated from the God that we have come to understand. Just any acknowledgement of God is a big step. They feel so much shame. That's what I love about life recovery groups, because a lot of people would never come in here first, but they'll go to a group of other people, fellow strugglers, and then they'll end up in here. What an amazing thing that people will actually say the 12 steps are anti-biblical. You know what I say to them? Have you ever read them? No, but I hear that they're satanic or something like that. Well, Dr. Bob and Bill W. wrote those steps. Bill W.'s the first one that got sober. And while he was in his beginning stages of sobriety, after he got out of the hospital, he was attending the Oxford groups. It was really a great group. They were trying to grow and hold each other accountable. And they operated with 4 absolutes. And this group, now this is the teaching that he had. After he got sober, by the way, he read the book by William James, the various experiences of spiritual awakening, something like that. And in there, William James says, the beginning of all religion is a cry for help. Isn't that great? Well, we believe that that's the beginning of a relationship with Christ. Help me, I can't do it. Anyway, the four absolutes, they believed were the encapsulation of all the teachings of Christ could be put in these four. Here they are. You tell me if it could be true, because I think it could be. Absolute honesty. Well, think about it. What time is it? Almost 12? Have you been absolutely honest? Have you told the whole truth? Have you shaved off, minimized, maximized, whatever? It's hard to be honest. Very hard. I was preaching on fake IDs, and I had a little fake ID I made for myself. And it said, safe driver. See, I have a fake ID. I thought I'd make it obvious to everybody. Safe driver. Well, the reason I put that on there is because I had just gotten a letter from the Highway Patrol in California. You are the reason people are dying on the freeways today. Your ticket record is so bad that if you continue to drive this way, there will be slaughter and bloodshed because of you. I've never seen such a shaming letter. I kept it because it was just an amazing letter. I am not a safe driver. And I put on there, responsible human being. I left my mother at church for an hour before I realized I had left her. I had to go back. I have ADD. So I was showing people you can take the fake ID off and you can take yours off. You can really be authentic and real here. Complete honesty or absolute honesty, absolute purity. So you're honoring your vows with your mind and your heart and your body. Your body is a living sacrifice for absolute purity. That is a standard that you can't compromise with. You're either pure or you're not. Absolute unselfishness. Now, was that the life of Christ? It was all about us, not him. And he died for us. And absolute love. So if you don't have love, you're not really following what Jesus showed us so well. So that's where he, in his early sobriety, that's what he was going with. That's what he was going to. That's what they were dealing with. And so they kind of got tired of all these alcoholics coming in and they formed their own group. And in the last speech that Dr. Bob ever gave, I have a transcript of it, he said this. He said, we didn't just invent these steps. We got them from the good book, especially the book of James, Sermon on the Mount, and 1 Corinthians 13. How can somebody say that, like, in the first three steps, God, I can't do this. I believe that you can, and now I'm going to let you. How can anybody say that's not biblical? And how about this? Write out all the things you've done and tell somebody what you've done. James 5:16, confess your sins one to another and pray for each other. I mean, there it is right there, biblical principle. How can this not be? How can it not be biblical to make it right with every person? I want to tell you, I reached a point where I finally did this horrible, great but difficult step of making it right, and I called everybody I'd ever hurt that I could remember. I paid back everything I'd ever taken from somebody. I called professors I had cheated on their tests. And when I was done, I could look everybody in the eye because I hadn't just accepted Christ's forgiveness, but I had made it right with other people. Boy, is that not biblical? How about that 12th step where you love what you've experienced so much that you are committed to bring other people in and experience it too? Dave Stoop and I were writers for 40 years, and all these other writing pairs broke up, and we said the reason that we were is that we stayed current. Because the step told us whenever you're wrong, be sure and admit that real quick. What do? Whenever you're wrong and somebody points it out, be sure and defend yourself. That's what we'd like to do. All of these steps are based on biblical principles. How about this? The first step says that you're powerless and your life's unmanageable. People say, well, that's weird. Well, how about powerless Paul? Look what he says. Romans 7:18. I know that nothing good lives in me. I want to do what's right, but I can't. He had an extreme limitation. And what a great thing when we admit that we have an extreme limitation that we're never going to fix on our own. Now, some people don't transform their lives because they're waiting on God to do what God's waiting on them to do. Other people, they believe I'm just too broken. God can't fix this. Well, I got to tell you, I know what that feels like. I was married 20 years and discovered that my wife was having an affair. And I was so stupid, we went on vacations with this other couple. Well, there were 3 couples. And they were having an affair right under my nose, and I didn't see it. And when I heard about this, I mean, she divorced me once I confronted her. But when I heard this, her best friend told me, I was so angry. There's an emotion I didn't even know I had this. I wanted to kill her. And I would have. It's a good thing there wasn't a gun. My little BB gun, I'd put her eye out or something. But I wanted to kill her. But then I knew I had to get better, or it'd kill me. So I started doing the work and eventually grieved what I'd lost, and I no longer wanted to kill her. I wanted her to just die. I was making progress. And then I didn't need her to die. I just wanted her to have some disfiguring disease and live with it forever. But finally, I realized God was on her side because God is on everybody's side. And she was the mother of our daughter. So I began to pray good things for her. That was a transformation. But I'm going to tell you, I was so broken. I literally felt like there was an ice pick into my heart. The pain was so severe, and that pain was fear. I didn't even know fear could be painful. But that's what it was. Some people, they think they're just too entrenched for God to do anything. This is the way I am, this is the way I was born, whatever. This is the way you married me, this is the way I'm going to be. Well, I know what that's like, too. We've been married 17 years, and so when we had Solomon, he's 16 now. Solomon was our first Jewish child, and we loved that name. I was a little older, and it had advantages. We'd go to the Holiday Inn, and I'd get the senior discount. Kids eat free. It's like paying us to be there. It was wonderful. But it was so sad. I was older, go into the store, and I said, first time, could you tell me where the diapers are? And she looked at me and said, well, it all depends. Now, I didn't think that was good. I thought that was a tacky thing for her to say. Well, before Solomon was born, we go to Babies R Us to get a chest for his room, big old heavy thing. And so they have a guy help me, comes out back. This guy, I'm sure his name was Thor. I didn't even ask him, but this big old guy comes out. We lift up the chest, and old Thor didn't notice that my hand was still under that chest when he dropped it. And he looks down at me and says, did that hurt? No. And he walks away, and then I'm dancing like that. Oh, my hand is throbbing. My wife, pregnant, walks up and says, what's going on? I said, it's pain worse than childbirth. Now, I've said dumber things than that even. I'm embarrassed. How do you get over that? Anyway, I realized that's exactly what I do. Pain, and I cover it up. Pain, I don't admit it. I try to act like it's not there. I have been entrenched in not showing the pain. And that finger, lost my fingernail, that led me to decide I better do something different than that. Some people think it's too late for you to change. Well, look, everybody knows Colonel Sanders, he didn't have a franchise till he was in his 60s. And Captain Crunch didn't join the Navy till he was 55. So it's never too late for anything. And some people say, I'm too small. I don't have enough to do anything. Well, if you think you're too small, think about the time you're laying in bed and that little mosquito flies by your ear, wanting to suck the blood out of you. It changes everything. A little mosquito has a tremendous impact. And in the Bible, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, littlest guy there. And what an impact he's had. Probably the most told story ever. And when you know the story, once he met Jesus, he gives away half of all his money, and with the rest, he's given away, paying back more than he ever took. And that wee little man shows the impact that Christ has on a person. Never too small. Mordecai Ham was an evangelist with big tents, and the crowds would throng to him, and then they got smaller and smaller and smaller. And one night, the crowd was so small, and the people that came to Christ were so few. He was in his hotel room weeping, asking God, why can't you use me anymore? Because it was such a small impact that night. Well, what Mordecai Ham didn't realize, one of the few people that came to Christ that night was Billy Graham. You don't know what God's up to. Your little thing could change the world. But you have to have a vision, and you have to be willing to live into what God has called you to do. And you have never, ever gone too far from God to lose that calling. My wife and I we've got the 1-year Bible for men, and she did the 1-year Bible for women. It'll be out in October. Devotional for every day of the year, which is a great idea till you get to about day 76, and you wonder, what am I going to write about next time? It's really hard. But in February, I opened up, and on the same day, you got the Old Testament, New Testament, Psalm, and a proverb. There, in the Old Testament, is Aaron worshiping a golden calf, first chief priest. And if you've ever made a bad hire, well, God knows what it's like. I'm thinking, we can't get much worse than that. And then I turn over here to the New Testament, and here's Peter. He's going to build the church, the rock. He's saying, I never met Jesus. I said, well, I guess you can get worse than that. One of the 12 never met him. Did Jesus take the calling away from Aaron? No, he restored him to the priesthood. Did he say to Peter, I'm going to have John do this since you blew it? No, he restored Peter. God has a calling for every human being here, a special use of your special gifts and talents. And if you've never lived into that, or you think it's too late or you've gone too far, I'm telling you, you have not gone too far. Now, I know what that's like. I'll finish with this little horrible thing. I thought I had gone too far. I went to Baylor University to get a Christian education, and what I got is I got a girl pregnant the first year I was there. So I just did what you do because you don't want to be inconvenienced. I paid for her. I didn't just pay for her to have an abortion. I pressured her to have an abortion. I didn't think much about it, you just do that. Till 3 days later, I realized I just paid to have my child killed. I destroyed my own flesh and blood. Even an atheist is going to have some kind of intrinsic guilt over destroying their own child. But I was a Southern Baptist, and the guilt and shame that I felt, I had 80 ulcers forming. I would eventually be hospitalized because they just kept getting worse. And the doctor said, if something doesn't happen, you're going to die. And fortunately, I had someone to truly minister to me and help me know that I could be forgiven. And Chuck Swindoll, I heard him say, your past just ended 1 second ago. Why would you live in it? So many people living in a past that they don't need to be living in. Recovery group can sure help that. Well, I still felt like, maybe God could use me. Some big pastor named John Bisagno met me, and he looks at me, and he said, I was a senior in high school when he says, you're going to be a preacher. I said, well, no, I'm the student director of the choir, and so I sing solos. And he goes, no, you're going to be a preacher. You're called. I know that. I don't know how he knew that. Why didn't God tell me? But I thought, I've blown that. That's not going to happen. Well, I got married eventually, and we were infertile for 7 years. Infertile. Guess what loving Christians would ask me? Because this is how they saw God. Do you think you're being punished for that abortion? I said, no. Because, see, I really believe Christ died for my sins. And I don't think you do something, Christ forgives you, and then you get punished for it. I said, plus, God doesn't need to punish us. We're so busy punishing ourselves. But that's what Christians think, that you just are going to have to pay for it the rest of your life. That is not true. There's some things you have to pay for. You make some choices. You have to pay the price for it. Well, 7 years ended. July 3rd, 1990, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, speaking to a group of charismatic Christians. Not like this group. I would say something, they'd say something right back at me. I mean, it was amazing. And then, here they come. And it was wonderful. But when it was over, this charismatic woman said, you know, while you were preaching, God told me to give you a message. Well, I just bought a new convertible, and I knew God was going to say, sell that thing and tithe that money. But no, she said, God told me to tell you, you're going to have a baby. I said, well, you know, my wife and I are an infertile couple. She said, I don't care if you're an infertile couple. God told me you're going to have a baby. Very pushy, charismatic woman. So that's in the morning. I had lunch with Victor Oliver, my publisher, and he says this, what are you going to do about children? He knew my story. I said, Victor, I think we're ready to adopt. He says, well, isn't that something? My best friend's daughter is 16, and she's pregnant. Her boyfriend is 16, and they can't raise this baby, but they're not going to have an abortion. They're looking for a Christian couple to raise their child. Would you like to meet them? July 4th, we met this couple. My wife was with me, and they decided we would be the parents. Christmas Eve, we went to bed. 1990, we didn't sleep long. We got a phone call. Our baby had been born in Atlanta. So we didn't have any trouble booking a flight on Christmas Day. We fly to Atlanta. But we didn't get to pick up our daughter because the next day, after we flew in, the 16-year-old boy came to our hotel. Spent about 5 hours, 16-year-old guy, asking a question every now and then because he wanted to be sure that we were the right parents for his little girl that had been born. Amazing. Oh, if I'd had that kind of character. So we go to the hospital. They didn't place her in the arms of my wife. The nurse brought her right to me, not just a baby, but God giving back to me the very thing I had destroyed. Because that's who God is. And if you don't believe that, you don't know who God is.